and welcome to another episode of E&Ftv's Bridging the Gap with me, Emily Edwards, and with Jason Gossip. So my name is Emily, and I work with people in the travel industry who are feeling under-supported, undervalued, or just fed up at work, to help them get back to doing work that they really love and having a bit of fun along the way that I think we sometimes forget about. I started doing this because I think that everybody deserves a chance to shine, and wherever you start off in life shouldn't define where you end up. So I'm really excited today to be taking the lead on this episode, and I'll be coaching Jason live and unfiltered so that you can all see how coaching works. So Jason, are you ready to start?
Well, I don't feel underappreciated or undervalued at work, just to be clear. I am ready to start. It absolutely terrifies me because I'm a man. I'm a man that likes a plan, and this is going to be totally freestyled and off the cuff. I don't know what's going to happen. We've got a subject that we've pre-agreed to kind of discuss, but apart from that, I know absolutely nothing. So yeah, it's terrifying, but let's do it.
Okay. It's good that you let me know that. I normally like to start my sessions with a little bit of getting into the present moment. So if you're feeling terrified, let's bring that down. Um, if you're comfortable to close your eyes, you can. I will close my eyes. You can do whatever you like. I'd recommend you put both your feet on the floor to stay grounded. And you can start to take some deeper breaths through your nose and let them out however feels comfortable. Through your nose, through your mouth, or maybe even sigh it out. That feels really nice sometimes. And as you're relaxing a little bit, you can roll your shoulders if you want. Perhaps stretch and squeeze your hands together. We do a lot of work with our fingers. And let your hands be comfortable in your lap. Keep breathing long, comfortable breaths. And just press pause on any worries that you've got, anything that's already happened for you this morning. And press pause on whatever you've got coming up later. The next 45 minutes or so is just for you. Take a couple more deep breaths. And whenever you're ready, you can open your eyes and let me know where you'd like to start the session today.
I'm quite comfortable with that because I use a Headspace app, which is a meditation app. So I'm comfortable with like box breathing, which is
Mm,
4 in, 4 hold, 4 out, hold.
that's a good
Um,
technique. Yeah.
and it's like breathing. People think it's crazy, people in high stress environments, commercial leaders in hospitality, whoever you are. You sometimes gloss over that and wash over it, don't you? That how can breathing? I breathe every day, I don't feel any better. But actually, doing what we've just done, even like a 1 minute breathing exercise, is like just yeah, so relaxing.
Yeah, it really calms us down. It activates the parasympathetic nervous system, which is our rest, relax, and recover, so we can start to be a bit more creative and bigger picture thinking rather than being worried and stressed.
Yeah. Okay. And stress is a good place to start because the only thing we've decided on this episode is that we're going to discuss stress, stress management, um, and it's I suppose just a little intro to me. It's something that's quite prevalent in my life at the minute. I've just got some issues with my 9-year-old son who has autism, suffers with, I suppose you could describe it as chronic anxiety.
Mm.
And this has kind of hit us as a family like a bomb over the last 8 months now. Seems to be spiraling and kind of getting worse and worse. And obviously the knock-on effect to us as two parents that both work full time has been like quite, it's been quite and continues to be quite difficult. So when you said, what do you want to discuss? I think that was the first thing that came to my mind, and not really just from a selfish point of view, but also what I'm interested in is there's so many people that work that are in similar situations that are trying to pay the bills, that are trying to have a decent standard of living, but the kind of way is that there are obstacles in the way with stress from outside sources. For me, it feels really difficult to kind of imagine, to manage, should I say. So that's why I was interested in kind of discussing a little bit on, or being coached on stress and stress management.
Mm. And tell me a bit more about that. What kind of impact does it have on your life?
I think that the the impact, and it's worse because I work from home, so I'm a remote worker. Um, and it's very difficult to have all the stress in the morning of, he's not going to school too much at the minute because the anxiety. I've got all the stress in the morning of getting him up, getting him ready to school. Is he going to go? Is he not? Then I've got to jump on a Teams call at 9 o'clock. And it's that segregation between all the stress in the morning and how you manage it, and then flipping to be, to someone else at 9 a.m. and someone's on a Teams call, hey, how's things with you? And I struggle really in the way that, and my wife doesn't. Like I've just been listening to her a minute ago on a Teams call downstairs, laughing and joking. Someone's asked her, "How are you?" And she says, "Yeah, fine. How are you?" And they're having a laugh on screen. If someone asked me how I was on a Teams call at 9 a.m. this morning, you'd have got it both barrels. Absolutely, I could not put a brave face on it. So I really struggle with that kind of segregation as from being a home worker, and I struggle to put a divide between my home life and my personal life.
Mm. It's interesting that you mentioned that, especially over the last few years where more people have been working remote and those blurred lines are coming in. What is it that makes you feel that there needs to be a segregation or a divide?
Um, I think part of it, I think maybe with me is quite endearing because I think if you come across as vulnerable, open and approachable, which I think if you're willing to tell somebody like I'm telling you about your personal life, that puts down barriers and it makes you more approachable as a person. So in some ways it's brilliant, but if I were to flip into an absolute rage this morning at my son and then carry it into a bad mood in the day and take it out on a client or a candidate, that wouldn't be advantageous to, my working life or my career. So for that reason, I think.
Mm, yeah, thanks for sharing. And is there any other impact it has on your life? So you've talked specifically about the morning. That sounds like a really high stress moment for you. Is there anything through the rest of the day which is making the stress more difficult to manage?
Well, obviously him not going to school and me being a home worker means that I'm very often spinning the plates of being teacher and because the school send the work home and I'm trying to, do my little side gig, which is a full-time job as well. So that in itself is really stressful. Evenings tend to be stressful because he knows that what comes after evening, well, it's the morning when all the stress is going to come regarding school. So he suffers at night time because put him to bed and up and down, he's in and out of bed, and I feel anxious. And we just have always had a cut off a work cut off point, but 9 p.m. has always been like, right, we'll do an hour of Netflix. That's when he's generally normal times in bed. Um, we can then whatever, open a bottle of wine or maybe just sit and chat and watch Netflix or whatever, and that's decompressed time. But recently that decompressed time has been compressed into almost nothing. So um, as an aside, it's interesting if you wear, I've got a Garmin watch, but if you wear any kind of like fitness or health tracker, these things are brilliant at picking up when you are stressed or when you are tired or anything like with resting heart rate and things. But there's HRV, which is heart rate variance or variability or something like that, which mine has just been absolutely in the bin recently. And that's due to, I think, the stress of the day and stress late at night and then going straight to bed, um, which is like a good physical marker of things not being kind of quite right in my mind and body.
Mm, thanks for sharing that. And do you notice any other physical markers? Because you've got your watch telling you, but do you notice it yourself? Any other physical markers of this situation?
It's brought to the surface some issues I had many years ago. I say many years ago, probably about 12 years ago now, um, related to anxiety, like within myself. Um, so I've always been, I was growing up and I was always being a little. bit claustrophobic, and I can't put my finger on kind of like when this started. I have some vague memories of being worried about being, and I must have been really small because I couldn't reach the gate, but worried about being trapped outside the gate. Or we lived in a council house and had a big brick shed. You go in the shed, your bike could be in there, and I'm worried about being trapped in the shed. Um, but then well, worked in hospitality for 20 years, and we had a really stressful time where the hotel basically burnt down, and I was meetings and events manager. This would make a good blog, actually, I've been thinking recently, but basically we did probably about 80 weddings a year around that time. Hotel burnt down and we were closed indefinitely at that point. It turned out being about 9 months, but we had all these brides and grooms knocking on the door saying, what the hell is going to happen with my wedding? So it was my remit basically with my team to take them to see other hotels, organize everything for them. It was a really stressful time. And around that time, it kind of made, I suppose the elevated level of anxiety and stress brought that kind of claustrophobia right up rising out of something that I'd not thought about since I was really little. So I went to some counselling, managed to kind of not counselling, but it was talking therapists. Managed to get to the bottom of it, get it sorted, probably 90%. So I still never went in lifts, but most of my other problems were sorted. Um, Again, that's been fine for 10, 12 years, and then recently that's come to the fore again. So I've been anxious about doing things that I thought I'd boxed off years ago, like 10 years ago, in that last time I went to talking therapists. So um, seems to have manifested quite, yeah, brought it all back to the surface, I think.
Mm, cool. Thank you for sharing. So it sounds like there's a lot of areas of your life that are being impacted in different ways. There's directly the relationship with your son and the stress that you're having to deal with him, the knock-on effect that has on you at work, the effect that has on your relationship with your wife or your partner, and then also a personal feeling of anxiety and this claustrophobia, which is then affecting what you can do in your life. Did I manage to kind of capture everything there?
I think you've nailed it. Yeah.
Okay, okay. Um, so looking ahead to the end of the session, what would have made this an amazing session?
I think it's nice to offload, even though I don't have a massive problem with opening up. Um, it's nice to talk to someone like you about it. Um, but I think, as nice as it is to chat, and I always think that my wife said to me like, well, why don't you go to like Andy's Man Club or one of these or one of these associations, clubs, not sure what they're called, but where, you can go and you can open up. And I said, to be honest, I'm sick of talking about it. I said, I don't have a problem like, there's this stereotype of a bloke being stiff upper lip and you get on with it and you don't talk about your feelings, which is kind of being gradually shred now, thankfully. I've never kind of been like that. So I don't have problems offloading. I don't have problems, well, I'm talking about it on camera now, aren't I? But I don't have problems with that. Um, what would make it successful if I had some actionable things to take away to actually improve things in some way?
Mm. So some kind of tool or some kind of action that's going to help you either reduce the stress or break the cycle that the stress is having in your
Correct,
life.
yeah.
Okay. Um, and what makes it really important for this to happen now? So we talked about the effect and the impact on your life. Is there any trigger point or anything that's happened recently that's made this important for you?
Just the general spiraling of the situation, I think. Just how things have gradually got worse, and you kind of left thinking, how much worse can they get? How's that going to affect me? Like even worse than I feel. I'm just not saying all the time, but worse than things are at the minute. Um, so I just think it's that general spiraling down and things getting worse. It's made me think some action needs to be taken here at some point. It's almost like a bucket filling, isn't it? And you need to kind of it's probably not the best analogy, but you need to puncture some holes in it. If you could puncture a couple of holes in it and just let out the water a little bit, the whole thing's not going to drain because water's still being, pumped in. But if you can just ease the pressure a little bit, you're staying at a level that you can, cope with. Does that
Mm.
make any sense?
It's a great analogy. So the water pouring in the bucket is the stress that's coming in every day, and the
Yeah,
holes are the way that the pressure's being released. And it would be great
yeah,
if we could find a way for you to make a few more holes and release a bit more pressure.
yeah.
Okay, sounds good. Um, and as we're talking about this, and it's sounding a little bit more practical in a sense, even though it's an analogy. What do you think we need to address, or what do we need to do to make those holes in your bucket and release some pressure?
I think that we're probably looking at coping strategies. Probably looking at maybe a reframing of the situation, or if not, some coping strategies that can just puncture a couple of holes in the bucket. And I think a lot of people listening may not identify specifically with my situation, but they'll all have buckets. Everyone has a bucket. This is just sometimes just made up, by the way, off the cuff. And everyone will have water being poured into it, and that water could be a mixture. It could be work, it could be health concerns, it could be financial, um, could be family, like it is with me. So it's important, I suppose, for us all to have these ways of, drilling holes in your bucket and just releasing a little bit of pressure. That's what I'm interested
Mm. I really love this analogy. Can you tell me more about the bucket? Do you have a visual image of it?
in. I visualize it as being like a brown made out of wood, almost like I don't know, an old school fisherman by the coast would kind of use. Um, a little bit tatty, a little bit rotten. That's what I'm visualizing it as. Please don't analyze that too heavily.
Okay, I'm beginning to get a similar picture now. So it's wooden. Does it have a handle?
Um, no, no handle, no handle.
Just a wooden bucket, lots of
Yep.
water. And you said it's rotten. I guess if we're by the sea and there's lots of water around, it's probably a bit, like that slimy thing that wooden stuff
Yeah,
gets
yeah,
from
yeah,
staying wet for a long time, something like that.
yeah.
And where is the bucket? Is it floating in the air? Is it on some kind of surface?
Well, right now we've talked about the old school fishermen by the sea, haven't we? By the coast, so it's down on a jetty near the sea of an English coastal town on the east coast somewhere. Um, that's not especially fashionable. Not Brighton, no, but somewhere I can't really think of an example, but somewhere on the east coast maybe.
Okay. So it sounds like a very down to earth, normal, everyday kind of bucket. Nothing
Yeah,
fancy. In use, probably been in use for a long time. Does that sound right?
yeah,
Okay.
correct.
And where are you in relation to this bucket?
I wasn't really in the image of the bucket. The bucket was just there on the jetty. Me, looking at it from maybe afar.
Mm, okay. And how full of water is it right now?
Um, I'd say it's a good three-quarters of the way up.
Mm. And how full can it be before things start to slide and spiral negatively?
How full can it be?
Or is it maybe too
Um,
full at three quarters?
okay. I'd say with coping mechanisms I've got in place at the minute, I managed to keep it about three-quarters. But for me, three-quarters is a little bit too full. Like if someone picked it up, it might slosh all over, and I might lose some, might overflow, which will be like a bad thing.
Mm.
Um, yeah,
So it's okay when the bucket's just still, but if there's some new trigger or new event that happens, something changes, like it gets picked up, it could slosh around and overflow.
yes, correct. If the homeostasis of the situation is not maintained, If anything new is thrown into the bucket or someone picks the bucket up, then it's, yeah, need to allow a little bit more space for those things in life to come in which may destabilize and still not lose any water from the bucket.
Mm, mm. And how is water getting into the bucket at the moment?
Um, Not through work, but mostly from the situation, the family situation that's going on. Almost exclusively, I would say.
Mm. And what holes are currently in the bucket that are allowing the water out?
You're liking this analogy, aren't you, Emily? So the Headspace app I mentioned, which is good. It's like 10 minutes a day. You can do more if you want, but it's just similar, like visualization, similar to kind of what we did, along with some breathing. That's in place. Also, like running. So I do a fair bit of running. Running for me is like changed over the years, and I think now sometimes I'll just go out for like a mental health run, which helps me manage things. Running's not for everyone, but I think some people say to me, "Why don't you join a running club?" And I'm like, "Why would I want to join a running club? I go running for my own like sanity. I know for some people it would be brilliant, but for me it's like the only time I have to myself in the day is just go out for a run. That kind of helps me a lot. I come back generally feeling better. Um, in terms of the stuff that you hear about releasing endorphins and generally, unless it's a really strenuous run, it helps me cope. So that's definitely one bucket, one hole in the bucket. Um, I'm not an alcoholic, but I there is a tendency to think if things are really bad, I could just do with a beer, like, or a glass of wine just to almost take the edge off. But I'm acutely aware that that's not really an effective coping mechanism. Doesn't feel we've talked about the Garmin and the health stats. Garmin definitely knows when I've had, more than one beer because the stats are just absolutely in the bin. Um, So I tend to try and stay clear of that. Um, I try and get a good night's sleep because that kind of affects me if I don't. So I try and do that as much as I can. Try and have some time at night where I can decompress, but that's difficult for reasons that I explained earlier. Um, Caffeine is generally something that and I'm known for in the industry, I think. Talking about Costa Coffee and chatted about it when I we met at WTM, was it WTM Independent Hotel Show, and she had a coffee. But I think too much caffeine can sometimes increase that base level of anxiety and the level of water in the bucket. So by limiting it, maybe putting a hole in there and draining some out. Um, they're they're the things that I'm aware of, and they're the coping mechanisms or holes in the bucket for me that I can think of.
Hmm. So you mentioned a few things that are, and these are my words, so feel free to tell me if I've got this wrong. A couple of things like the Headspace app and the running, which is like time to yourself, reconnecting with the present moment, getting some exercise, doing some breathing, that sound like a kind of similar kinds of holes. And then you've got a sort of the coping mechanism of maybe having a drink, but you're aware that the knock-on effect of that is maybe not so good for you. And then you've got the let's say support of having caffeine to help you get through the day, but you know that it'd be good to reduce that. So it sounds like you've got a few different styles of holes at the moment. Do you think there's any style of hole that would really help you that you haven't got at the moment?
I can't I can't think of anything. You're right in what you've just said. There are different styles of holes, but I maybe that's what I need. But I can't think of anything else that I could be doing that I'm not doing, if that makes sense.
Mm. If you're comfortable, I'd like to take the visualization a little bit further. Um, would you be happy to do that? Do a bit of imagining about the bucket in a slightly different way?
Yeah, you're really having to think on your feet, aren't you?
No, this is great. I'm really enjoying it. So at the moment, you've been talking about the bucket on the jetty. As we've been discussing, has it got any closer to you? Or have you got any closer to it? Or is it still further away?
I think I've been observing it a little bit closer because we've been talking about it. So I'm now on the jetty with a bucket of water.
Okay. And how far away is the bucket from you on the jetty?
I could touch it,
You could touch it. Okay. And now that you're next to it, how tall is it compared to you?
knee height.
Knee height.
I've just looked down like it's actually there.
So you've got it down on your right hand side. It's about knee height. I assume it's still about 3/4 full.
Yeah.
Okay. And we talked earlier about drilling holes in the bucket, which, as it's wooden, I think that would be the best tool to use to make these holes. So, what I'd like you to imagine is that you've got a drill in front of you on the jetty, and you pick up the drill, and I'm assuming you know how to use a drill. Do you know how to use a drill?
I'm not brilliant at DIY, but yeah, I've used one once or twice.
You can make a hole in a bucket.
Yeah.
So, what I'd like you to imagine is that you pick up the drill. What colour is the drill that you're seeing?
It's like black and yellow, like Bosch or something,
Okay. And as you pick it
quite
up,
modern.
I imagine it should feel quite heavy, right? These drills have got a strong battery and they've got all the metal bits, so it's quite heavy in your hands. And if you want
Yeah.
to, you can feel free to move your hands around. Maybe you can see that I'm doing that as I'm trying to imagine picking up a drill. So you pick up the drill and it's quite heavy and it's got a nice big drill bit to make a nice sized hole in your bucket. And then I'd like you to imagine that you're kneeling down. You've got your bucket on your right side, so you can kneel down and start to drill a hole in the bucket. Can you tell me about
Okay.
anything that you're seeing or feeling as you're doing that?
In terms of what I'm visualizing,
Hmm.
um, I'm concerned that the highly sophisticated and modern drill is not going to make a clean hole in the bucket, and it's actually all going to splinter, and the whole water's going to flood out, which would be really bad.
Interesting. So, what tool would you like to use if not a modern drill?
The drill bit I'm imagining is quite broad, and I think I need something a bit more slender that's going to create like a smaller, like a sharper but smaller, more focused hole that goes through it, and I think that's going to help the bucket not explode or disintegrate.
Very good. Okay, so then in front of you as well, you can see that you've got that little thing where you have all the drill bits available to you. Would you
Yeah,
like to take out the one that's in there and pop in a smaller, more focused drill bit?
yeah, I could do that.
Okay. And so now, as you go back to the bucket to make a hole, how are you feeling about that now?
I'm feeling a little bit more confident that it's not going to splinter.
Where would you like to make the hole to reduce the chances of the bucket exploding?
I feel like it's stronger at the bottom because because I don't know why really, but it's kind of so the shape is a little bit like that, and so I put the hole kind of there where it seems stronger because it's more weathered at the top.
Okay, okay. So as you're making that hole towards the bottom of the bucket where it's less weathered and you think it's going to be stronger, what's happening?
Um, it's still splintering more than I'd like, and I'm not really getting a sharp, focused hole, but it's not as bad as it I imagined it initially.
Is there anything you'd like to change about what you're doing?
Um, I think I'd maybe like a bucket that's more suitable for drilling holes in.
So what would that bucket look like?
Um, what kind of bucket can you drill holes in? Like maybe a plastic one would be better in terms of like durability and more the weather would affect it less. be more durable.
So tell me about this plastic bucket.
Um, it's um, it's a bucket like you would use if you were like washing the windows. It's got um, it's got a silver handle on. It's blue. Um, it's not sturdy, but I think you could drill a hole in it and it wouldn't splinter because it's not wood.
Mm, that's interesting. So it's not as sturdy as this old, been used for years wooden bucket, but it's probably more suitable for taking in water and letting water out because it's easier to drill holes in.
Correct, yeah.
Mm. So with this blue bucket, what I'd like you to imagine is picking up the wooden bucket and tipping all your water in the blue bucket.
Okay,
And
yeah.
then you can take your drill and drill a hole in the blue bucket.
Okay, I can imagine that.
Hmm. So now what's happening?
So it's working better. I'm able to drill a hole like easier without it sort of splinting, whatever word is correct. I'm still worried that it's gonna crack, but I'm kind of managing it. Okay.
Hmm.
This bucket's smaller than the wooden one.
Oh, that's good to know. That's good to know. And is there any other tool or other support you'd like to get as you begin drilling a few more holes in this blue plastic bucket?
Um, I'd make maybe like another bucket on hand in case the worst comes to the worst with this blue bucket
Okay.
as a support mechanism, as a fail safe.
Mm.
Um, I can't think of anything else. I've got the tool. It's quite windy. I'm a little worried it's smaller, less sturdy. It might blow over, but I think we've got this.
It's interesting that you said you might like another bucket in case this one doesn't work.
Yeah.
How many more buckets would you need to make you feel comfortable?
Um, if you get a multi-pack from Amazon, like of 10, well, Amazon delivered to my jetty on the East Coast,
Of course.
maybe.
Of course.
Yeah, I'd met three. I'd like three different colours.
Okay. Okay.
Not yellow though, because it's stormy out there, and you know, the algae and the moss. They need to be darkish colours.
Okay. So three spare darkish colour buckets. And what
Yeah.
will having those extra buckets enable you to do?
Um, just be able to drill a hole with the confidence that if I don't manage to get through and I make a mess of it, then I've got another two attempts plus Amazon.
Mm. Mm. That's interesting. It's kind of like all your hopes are not resting on being able to drill a hole in that rickety wooden bucket anymore. Now you've got the option to drill a hole in a bucket that's better suited and have more times to try doing the thing if it doesn't work out.
What does all this say about me, Emily?
What do you think it says?
I've totally lost the analogy at some point. I'm purely focused on these visualizing these buckets on the East Coast. So I'm going to need your help with that.
So tell me, the Jason that's drilling holes in these buckets and has spares, what qualities does he have that you would like to bring to everyday real life Jason?
Um, the ability to have a contingency plan with extra buckets. Um, the ability to recognize if a coping strategy, i.e. a drill bit's not working and switch.
Mm.
Um, the ability to leave my life and get a new one, i.e. a new bucket.
And what
They're
does
the
that
things
look
I
like?
derive.
What does leave my life and get a new one really mean?
I'm joking to anyone that's watching this. I suppose it would mean, see, it's really difficult to change a bucket because, well, it's not, but it's not something that's desirable to do from from a viewpoint of changing like where I'm at, changing the situation is really difficult, isn't it? So I don't, how else could I change the bucket? Or is it just how I'm viewing the bucket? Am I viewing it as a wooden old rickety thing when actually I need to view it as a blue plastic thing that I can drill holes in easily?
Hmm, that would be an interesting change, wouldn't it? I
Yeah, I
think,
suppose. Sorry, go on.
no, 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 you carry on.
I suppose a lot of our stressors are personal to us, and it's how you view them, isn't it? Two things can happen. The same thing can happen to two people. One week will be absolutely fine, one it will be kind of like the end of the world. And there's the old, I think it's but it comes up on Facebook sometimes, and it's a cartoon image of two people on a bus. They're on the same bus, looking out of the but different windows on each side of the bus, and one sees a horrible, like dark and stormy kind of scene, and the other one's kind of looking out and it's sunny and there's a sea and everything. And these guys are both in the same bus, but their kind of viewpoint, vantage point, and how they're interpreting the view is, yeah, like
Mm,
totally different, if that
mm.
makes any sense.
Yeah, I think that's a really beautiful way to look at it. And when you said change my life, maybe it was a little bit flippant, and maybe you meant change everything in my life. But there is that thing of when you change the way you look at things, the things you look at change. That's another
Yeah.
quote who I can't remember who said it. So I think that although it may have been a flippant comment to start with, you've reached a really beautiful point that can really help you. So you've got three qualities that you've found from this Jetty Jason, which is having a contingency plan, recognizing what's not working and being able to change it rather than stick with it, and changing your perception or your interpretation of the situation.
So we've actually got to something that resembles like a bit of a plan there, haven't we? Just from my kind of off the cuff analogy of a bucket,
Yeah, I'm glad you went with me
which
on that journey.
I imagine though, let's play devil's advocate here. I imagine not everyone that you coach, or maybe I'm wrong, is as open as I've been today, would provide you with a metaphor for you to use, and a decent one at that. So
Excellent
how
metaphor.
listen, Emma, I'm a coach's dream. But what other ways for someone that's more guarded, more has come to you kind of knowing that they need to, but are not 100% willing to open up? How would you deal with people like that? Now it's time for me to flip and put you on the spot.
I will answer your question, but we do have a little bit more of the coaching session to do afterwards because this plan is not yet a plan. And as I said, I love to plan, so we're going to make it more actionable. But I will answer your question. Metaphors are one way, and I think very visually, so I love it when someone brings up a metaphor. But there's also things like physical sensations. Sometimes people will say, "Oh, I just got this feeling in my chest," or you might notice that they changed how they sit, or they might use hand gestures. So some people are very what's the word, emotive with their hands. Sometimes people talk about emotions. So they might talk about an anger or a fear or a excitement. Um, and sometimes people talk about beliefs. They'll say things like, "I'm not somebody that can do something like that," and that's an interesting thread to pull on. So there's many different ways this conversation could have gone, which is why I couldn't tell you at the beginning what was going to happen. But metaphor is one way that we get out of our logical thinking, worried, stressed brain, and more into in touch with our limbic system, which is all about feelings, beliefs, desires, and that's a little bit below the surface. So when you can see that, as you've seen, you can change it. So you started with your bucket in one way, and we've changed your bucket to another way, and that's enabled us to bring it back to logical present day Jason with a beginning of a plan.
The things that we say, the narrative that we use to ourselves is so important, isn't it? The things that we tell our brain is so important. Something I talk to about my son with my son quite regularly. And you don't always know that you're doing it. You know, I am this or I am that. You could
Mm,
flip to I'm feeling this, I'm thinking that, which makes it a little bit more, I don't know, transient, maybe a little bit more fleeting and passing,
yeah,
rather than this is a solid structure and I am this and it's not changing, which is really harmful.
yeah. And I would love to add on another step to that, which is I could be this, or may I be that. So when we say to ourselves, oh, I'm useless, I'm like, I don't know, I'm bad at DIY, then you could say, I haven't learned yet how to do DIY, or I haven't had much practice at DIY. And the language of possibility means we could say, with some help and with some practice, I could do decent DIY. And that really changes how you approach a situation with your drill.
Yeah, yeah. No, I totally agree.
So, Jason, I would love to get this to be something that's really practical for you. So, you've got the three main prongs of what you've discovered today. So, contingency plan, recognizing what's not working, and pivot, and then how to change your perspective or interpretation of the situation. So, how can you apply these learnings into your real life situation every day?
In practical terms, um, so taking each one, what was the first one was
Contingency plan.
con so contingency plan, which was basically having more buckets, wasn't it? More buckets available. Um, I don't know. I don't know about the contingency plan. I suppose it morphs into changing things that aren't working, doesn't it? Which is like trying certain things to help both me and my son and us as a family, but then recognizing when things are not working. So that could be a bedtime routine, um, potentially, or a routine in the morning, which is yeah, like not working. So kind of changing it. Would that be a good example?
Mm, yeah. And I think you're right. It does sound like those two are quite related. What can you do to change something is sort of related to having a contingency plan, right?
Yeah,
Perhaps there's something about not being wed to the plan that you've currently got. I kind of got that impression as you were talking as well. Like, we're trying to do this thing in the mornings, for example. We're trying to get my son ready for school. That's your number one goal. And maybe you tell me if this sounds right or not. Maybe there's a feeling of disappointment or you've not managed if your son doesn't go to school or if things don't go to plan. Then you might feel disappointed, he might feel stressed, you might feel upset. And so there's all
yeah,
this extra layers of emotion that come on top of it. So perhaps the plan is not so much to have multiple contingency plans, but more to have a kind of freer feeling about being not wed to the first plan that we have. Does that resonate?
yeah. It does. It's really hard to do when school's so important. Um, so yeah, I mean, I would love to be able to do that, to have that kind of flexibility to think this has not worked. What I'd love for is to do that, to have the flexibility, and but then to genuinely believe that it's okay, Plan B is fine, when I know that Plan A is so vital, if that makes any sense. So
Mm,
vital to get Plan A right, and like bound up so much in it that you're right. What you described is absolutely correct.
mm. Is there anything that you've learned in our session today that can help you to get a bit closer to that?
I think to be able to like remember the three and come back to them as a like a visualization and an analogy is helpful. Um, yeah, to be able to kind of pivot if something's not working, without a doubt. Um, the hardest one I think is like the perspective changing, which is just seems like a vast concept, but a bit like nailing fog to a wall, like really,
Yeah.
you know, really difficult to pin down. Um, and I imagine a lot of people struggle with that because you're, yeah, your personality is quite hardwired, isn't it? And to change your perspective on how you look at something, be that in business, at work, or in your personal life, or both, and the blurry line of both, I imagine is like super difficult. What are your thoughts on that?
Mm. Well, like you said before, a lot of us don't even hear the voices in our head, or we just hear them in a very passive way. Um, so exactly, it's hard to change those because they're just a constant stream. What I would suggest is that we make a tool for you to be able to break that stream a little bit. So what I would suggest is that we come up with a catchphrase, something that's catchy and that's going to. I like to use a bit of humor or a bit of something that's going to catch your brain off guard. It's going to be different to what your constant flow of consciousness is. Maybe something to do with the buckets. Like maybe you tell yourself, "Hey, Jason, it's time to change the bucket now." Um, or we can work on that and think of something that sounds kind of snappy and good to you. And then think of a few key moments in the day when you would like to change that perspective. For example, at that moment that you realize your son isn't going to be able to go to school, then say this snappy thing to yourself, and it will enable you to kind of change the flow of your thoughts. And then as you practice it more and more, it will become a bit more natural and a bit easier for you.
Okay. Okay, so that's like a bit of a pattern interrupt then.
Exactly. Is there any phrase that comes to mind as we talked about, the action you did was to change the bucket from a wooden one to a plastic one and make sure you had multiple more plastic ones so that if something went wrong, you'd still be okay. Is there any kind of snappy phrase that you could tell yourself that Jason at the jetty would tell himself as he's going through that process of changing?
Well, I like Jason at the jetty.
Okay. You
We
could be
could
like,
use that.
I need to be Jason at the jetty now, or I'm Jetty Jason. Time for Jetty Jason to come out. Something like that.
Maybe that. Well, yeah, it's memorable, I suppose, and quite catchy.
Yeah.
Quite cheesy, which I like.
I'm kind of imagining like a weird kind of anti superhero, like Jetty Jason is this kind of fisherman guy with his buckets, and he's going to come in and save your mornings. Like, just getting a funny mental image.
You've
Okay, so
cartoonified it, haven't you?
um, so what would be, let's start with two key moments of the day when you think it'd be helpful to try and change your perspective on things.
Okay. Um, just easy. That's like mornings and evenings.
Can you be more specific?
Say like 9 p.m. bedtime.
Okay. And in the morning, what time or what's the trigger activity?
Um, like 8 a.m. Um, which is transition from breakfast to those preschool things like teeth brushing and clothes on.
Okay. So 8 a.m. ish when you've done your breakfast and you need to start getting ready for school, or your son needs to start
Yeah,
getting ready for school, and 9 p.m., which is normally his bedtime.
yeah.
And at those two moments, what's the phrase you're going to say to yourself? I said a few things, but it needs to be something that works for you.
We'll go with it. What was the Jetty one again? Time for
Jetty
Jetty
Jason.
Jason.
Time for Jetty Jason. We like that? Okay.
Yeah.
I do quite like that. Okay. So the idea is that you'll say that phrase to yourself at these two key points. And as you practice, you might find that you start using it at other points as well. Um, and when you say that phrase to yourself, what do you want to happen?
Like a reframing of the situation, a kind of appreciation that plan A doesn't work, then plan B will be fine.
Mm.
And kind of like just to like I maximize the potential of that in the
Mm.
way that it's not the end of the world. It's not because there's a tendency to employ catastrophic thinking, I think, and then ruminate on, you know, days, weeks, and months in the future, instead of kind of like just dealing with things in the present moment and making things as good as they can be in that moment.
Mm.
I think
That's a really lovely
that would be
insight.
helpful.
So it's not just plan B is the second to plan A, but when we have to switch to plan B, how do we maximize that and do the best we can with it? That's a nice
I
way.
think so, yeah, because the option is just all plans go out of the window and it's just absolute carnage. like both in terms of home atmosphere and but there's a tendency to just throw the baby out with the bathwater, I think, isn't there? And just like, oh, today's just gone to pot, that's it. Everything is just
Mm,
whereas actually a lot can be salvageable with just a change in perspective with
mm.
the Jetty Jason implementation.
I love that. Sounds like you're on a good path. Um, and would you like any support with that from anyone around you?
Wife,
And how will you let her know about this and what support would you like from her?
I'll just send her the video.
So she has to watch the whole thing.
I reckon so.
Okay. Okay. And
It
how,
just, yeah, I mean, it does help, doesn't it, to be on the same page as people, your nearest and dearest, whether that's people at work, whether that's people in your family life. Um, I think specifically as parents, we need to be somewhere on the same page and like pulling together in the same way. Otherwise, there's mixed messages, which is something I think that we like struggle with. Um, I suppose it's the same in business. You know, everyone needs to be pulling the same way, and if not, you've got a fracture, haven't you?
mm, it's great to be on the same page, especially when in higher stress situations, because sometimes in lower stress situations it doesn't matter as much, but when the pressure is on, that's when the cracks start to show. So I think it's great
Yeah.
to get her on board. Um, and how will you celebrate yourself when you've had a day where you've remembered twice to bring out Jetty Jason and you feel like you've managed to have a change in perspective? What will you do to celebrate yourself?
I'll probably not open a beer Moretti, maybe, because there's probably not going to be good. I don't know. I don't know actually. Is it not enough just to like have a mental celebration, or in order to kind of anchor it, does it need to be you need to go and out buy yourself a new whatever?
No, you definitely don't need to buy anything. It can be a mental celebration. I think it's just good to recognize when we've done what we said we were going to do and let our brains know that we're glad we did it because that helps us to do it again the next day.
Okay, yeah, no, that makes sense. Celebrate the wins.
Yeah. So maybe after bedtime, that's a good time to do it. End of the day, just think, did I manage to do that twice today? Pat on the back. Maybe share with your wife that you did it.
Yeah, okay, yeah, because yeah, I can see why that's key.
Yeah. And is there anything else you'd like to tweak about this plan to make it usable for you?
Um, I don't think so. I don't think so. It's just remembering to use the techniques, I suppose, isn't it?
Mm, at the times, 8 a.m.,
At,
9 p.m.
yeah, at stressful times as well when things can go awry. I mean, often like the meditation is brilliant. It's a long-term commitment, and I suppose you can't beat yourself up like the same with your teachings just now. If kind of things go off awry and don't work out the first time and resolve a situation, I suppose it's a long-term commitment to retraining your brain with these things, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah. It starts with a small step. Long term commitment, small steps.
Fantastic.
Great. That's the end of the session. Jason, if you're comfortable with that, and I'll hand over to you to do the closeout.
No, that's fantastic. Well, I'd say I've really enjoyed it. I was a little bit apprehensive coming onto it because, as I say, it was totally unscripted. Normally, when I interview people, we agree on 4 or 5 questions which to base things around. So yes, it's a loose conversation, but they still have the framework or the skeleton of what's going to be discussed down to kind of like the questions which they can prepare. So it was quite terrifying actually just to have a subject and not know what was going to happen. But I think I can see increasingly in society these days the lines are blurred between home life and work life, and I can see how your support would kind of help someone both personally and professionally. So I suppose do you want to relay anything about your services? Or how do people get in touch with you? Is LinkedIn the best way, or email, or
Yep.
You're happy to answer any questions on comments.
Yeah, definitely. We'd be happy to answer any questions. Yep, people can find me on LinkedIn if you look for Emily Edwards Coaching. My website is emilyedwardscoaching.co.uk, and from there you can join my mailing list, or you can book in a call if you're interested in working with me. The call is free, so don't feel worried or obligated. There's no hard sell. It's just a conversation to see where you are, what you want to get to, and if I can help you get there. So I'm mainly working with individuals doing coaching at the moment, and I have a few packages which you'll find the most updated version on my website as well. Um, yeah, but I think that coaching is amazing. As you've seen, it can take really different pathways, and you're exactly right that it really looks at the whole person. So while we often think, like, for example, if I want to find a new job, I've got to do certain things at work, that's true, but you've also got to understand yourself as a person because you're working 8 hours or more a day. You don't want to be pretending to be someone else or not living as your fullest self. I'm not saying you have to like do karaoke in the office just because you love karaoke, but what I'm saying is that if you're not doing a role that's aligned with your strengths, your values, what you feel might be your purpose in life, then you're going to spend a lot of time feeling unfulfilled. And you don't have to feel like that. You can find jobs or work that you really love and have some fun with it too.
We should have mentioned this at the start, but obviously you've had a rich career as a commercial leader within hospitality, covering, many different brands, IHG, some others, haven't you? So this is obviously a hospitality podcast and for students as well, but there's a link, I suppose, to like the hospitality industry there. You're now a coach, but you were a hotelier prior to that.
Yep. So most recently, I was with IHG Hotels and Resorts in Singapore as a commercial lead. So in the corporate office, managing the Singapore and Malaysia hotels. And before that, I was always in B2B distribution. So most recently with hotel beds as an area manager in Singapore and Malaysia. So contracting with hotels to then distribute the hotel rooms onto other agencies. So always been in commercial, always been in that kind of like account management side of things as well. Um, and I really see that there's a lot of great people in our industry that are not being helped to maximize what they can do. And I don't just mean maximize as in their commercial output, which is obviously one thing that we do, but being helped as in to maximize the life that they're living. I think some other industries invest more in stuff like that, people development and support and coaching, mentoring. And I think in ours, there is a little bit of a gap, which is part of what inspired me to do this. Because I see loads of great people just not quite able to find the thing that makes them happy, or just not quite able to manage their difficult boss or something like that. So that's why I would aim to help those people.
I think we could do a whole other show actually on how you transitioned from commercial hospitality into doing what you're doing at the minute. But unfortunately, we don't have any more time. So, but thank you, Emily, so much for coming on, doing that kind of live coaching. If you're interested, if it's piqued your attention, then you can get in touch with Emily in the comments, or you can get in touch with Emily on LinkedIn. Um, well worth a chat as you've seen today. So thank you so much, Emily, for coming on.
Thanks for having me, Jason. Speak soon.
Pleasure. And that's all we've got time for this week. Hope you've enjoyed it. Like and share the show because it helps us attract really cool guests like Emily Edwards. See you next week.
Here we go!